besties, what's up? My name is Meg. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we are doing my most prized books in my collection thus far. So here's the thing. I wish I could give you a number as to how many books I have in my collection. Maybe one of these days we'll actually count. I picked out, let me count, hang on. 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 36 books that are so far my most prized books. Some of them, wait, I'm missing one. I knew I was missing one. 37. I have chosen 37 books. All right, we're restarting this intro. Hi besties, what's up? My name is Meg. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we are doing my most prized books that I have in my collection thus far. Now, when I say most prized, I mean ones that either A, I feel are worth a lot as far as like physicality money, and then 2, ones that I feel hold such sentimental value towards me and my progress of reading. Let's get into the video, shall we? So the first books that we are talking about are books that hold sentimental value from how I grew to be a reader, how I fell in love with reading. These would be the books that I would read over classwork if I was able to during my early elementary school, middle school years. So now the first book that holds such sentimental value to me is The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane by Kate DiCamillo. I used to have my dad read this to me right before bedtime, so it was always something special that him and I used to do. I think we read this so many times as a kid growing up. Like, I know the story front to back so well. Been a while, but definitely still holds such deep sentimental value. It is a chaptered picture book. So, just looking at it just gives me such nostalgia for the fact that my dad would read this to me in particular. So I always loved when my dad would read me books right before bed. And then as I was learning how to read, he would have me read him the books. So it was just something special that my dad and I would share. Another book that I fell in love with growing up was Because of Winn-Dixie by Kate DiCamillo. I loved this book. When I learned how to read and I could read on my own, I read this well over a dozen times. I loved this book. This book was something so deeply special to me. I remember staying down at my grandma's, and my grandma had actually bought the movie Because of Winn-Dixie. So when I was able to watch that, I fell even more in love with Because of Winn-Dixie. Now, as I got a little bit older and I could read just a little bit better, I was able to read The City of Ember by Jeanne Duprat. But The City of Ember, I had originally watched the movie, and this is actually a whole series. I think it's called like The People of Ember or something. There's a whole series based off of it, but I really only remember reading City of Ember growing up. So I actually want to go back and reread City of Ember and then like actually get to read the other books in the series. If I did read them, I just don't remember. I just prominently remember City of Ember being the biggest contributor. I also, however, read one of my favorite book series growing up that I read and my brother read and just was so popular when I was growing up. I saw them as they were being released. So now that they're actually like all released, it's kind of crazy because it's like I grew up as they were being released. But that is the Percy Jackson and the Olympians. So I actually have the original covers. And as you can see, like these books were very well loved growing up. I loved reading these as a kid. Around this time last year, I had actually audiobooked all of the Percy Jackson books and the Heroes of Olympus, Trials of Apollo. I also audiobooked the Magnus Chase series. So it was really fun to be able to read these yet again. I definitely think that these are perfect for those who want fantasy. I also definitely think that these are perfect for any age. Granted, they're a little outdated now just because, like, you know, they were written to be, as they were coming out, they were written to be during that time year. So they do mention like 2008 or something. And so I don't know. It was just kind of fun and funny, in my opinion. Okay, so now for our next little segment is our middle school, high school years. Now, as I started progressing in school, I slowly started to fall out of love with reading. Not because I didn't love to read, but because of where my head was at mentally. I was a very depressed kid growing up, and growing up having the depression that I did, rather than leaning into things that I loved, I felt that I didn't earn them. So I read very sporadically over that time. However, one of my favorite books that I think I read probably when I was in 7th grade was The Perks of Being a Wallflower by Stephen Chbosky. I don't know. I read this, and this book in particularly actually really helped kind of shape the way that I viewed the world. That growing up, you're very ignorant to things that you don't know, and as you go into high school and everything, you slowly learn, like, hey, things aren't always as grandy dandy that people say they are. So The Perks of Being a Wallflower by Stephen Chbosky had definitely become one of my favorites. I love the movie. I think that the movie stuck as closely to it as best as it could, and I am forever grateful for that. Now, I worked at a summer camp back in 2018. Some bad things happened at that summer camp to me, but prior to that, I was hospitalized for suicide ideation. And so camp was supposed to be something good. Some bad things happened, everything like that. I didn't take any books with me to read. So while we were at a Dollar General, I actually picked up The Help by Catherine Stockett, and I read this the entirety of the summer. I remember reading it in between the classes that I taught. I remember reading it before bed. I remember it constantly being in my backpack. And this was something so special to me for the fact that it felt like a lifeline. It gave me a place to escape when I was really starting to feel the struggle of myself mentally. So having The Help as a lifeline was something that was very, very well needed during this time period. And I also only bought it for $2. So after The Help, I really read very sporadically throughout my time. I was gifted one Christmas a book, and I didn't pick it up till April. And the only reason why I picked it up was because I knew that whoever it was wanted to be able to talk to me about it. So they had gifted me The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I loved this book when I first read it. It was something very different from anything that I had ever read before. I probably had rated this 4 or 5 stars. Granted, my rating system now has changed since I have read so many more books, but The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo ended up starting the snowball effect of the avalanche that is now my reading life. After Taylor Jenkins Reid, I knew that I wanted to read another book. So the book that I really fell in love with was The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. This book was so good. I read it in one day, in one sitting. I had so much fun with it. This book got me into really liking the thriller, the psychological thriller, anything that dealt with like mental health, really, I loved. This kind of really put that avalanche into motion. Now, these next books, I don't want to say that they have very big sentimental value. So these books mean a lot to me for the fact that they were indie published, and I personally like the indie published versions better than the new versions that they are. But we have the entire Zodiac Academy all in the indie published covers, so all of the original covers. I am so thankful to be able to have these in my collection. I slowly accumulated them and we found them and everything like that, and they're all in really great condition, so we are so super happy with these. Now, granted, Zodiac Academy was long after some of these other books. This is just a random order that I'm going in now. If you don't remember, I had a reading vlog of me reading this book, Fairy Tale, and I read it and I found that they were re-releasing the book. However, I wasn't a fan of the new cover. What did I do? I Facebook marketplaced it. We found it. We got it shipped to us. We have the indie published version of Fairy Tale. I am so happy to have this in my collection. What is insane is the font size. The font size in its own is just absolutely insane. As you saw also on this channel a while back, I went on a journey to essentially Detroit, Michigan, and we found the original covers of ACOTAR being sold. So we obviously had to jump on this offer. We are not going to include how much we bought them for, but just the fact that we bought them in general just makes me so happy to have them in my collection, because these are out of print. Like, they no longer print these whatsoever, so the only way that you can find them is if you can find somebody who is willing to sell them. Speaking of selling and buying through Facebook Marketplace, just the summer before I went on our ACOTAR journey to Michigan, I drove to Winona, Minnesota, and we bought the entirety of the Throne of Glass in the box set. Like, we were so extremely happy. We also got an additional Throne of Glass book that was in pristine conditions. Like, they might have a little bit of spine, but that just means that they were loved, and I appreciate that they were loved at one point in time. But now that they are loved, I've already loved this series, so I'm taking that their love is also now my love, because I read this series within, I want to say, about 3 months. So I was so super excited to get the original out of print. I also Facebook Marketplace these, so yeah. Now that we've gone through all of the books that I have found via Facebook Marketplace, I'm going into the last of our books. Now, I took a trip back in 2024 where I had gone to Australia. Fourth Wing and Iron Flame had just come out at this point. I was so super upset that I wasn't able to get the original Fourth Wing designs. However, when we were in Australia, we were able to get the exclusive editions that were sold via Across the Sea. Like, these are their special editions of Fourth Wing and Iron Flame. So we traveled with these. These have now become not only a keepsake for our trip, but also just a great collection item to have from being across the sea and bringing home. In totality, I brought home 5 books for myself, and then I brought 2 books of these home because I wanted my sister-in-law to have one. And our last book that it means a lot to have for me in my collection is this copy of Glow. This was from the first publishing wave, and it actually has a publishing error in the book. So chapter 21 should actually be Arin, not Queen Melina. So they had to republish Glow in specific, but luckily I kept the first copy because I wanted to be able to say that I had a publishing error book, which honestly to me is one, pretty cool, and then two, you never know any of these days how much it might end up being. Granted, probably won't sell it, but it's still just kind of cool to know and see. Thank you guys so much for watching today's video as I took you into some of my favorite books from my collection thus far. I hope you did enjoy. Please do all of the YouTube things you know how to do, and I will see you in a bit. Bye!